All right. So, watched a bunch of movies I've never seen before. This is Rank the Movies once again. And I am going live because I've got 10 films I finally got around to watching this week. And it is time to talk about them. This isn't going to be a recurring thing like I've done in the past where I've done week after week after week doing another set. I've just happened to do a bunch of them because my unwatched shelf exploded again and I just wanted to get a bunch of movies done right away. I will return to this format the next time I just start clearing a bunch of films off that shelf at once. So let's dig right in and get started with the first movie I watched. Let's start with the beginning, that first one, the one that started this whole thing, and that is the movie Laser Team. This movie is the first motion picture by the people made by the people who created Red versus Blue. So that is the Rooster Teeth production studio. This is their first feature-length film. They have two others, including Bloodbath and a sequel to this movie. Basically, this movie is about four random guys from the South who are two of them are lighting off fireworks. One of them is the sheriff, and the other one is a drunken rowdy, basically a teenager. He's been held back a lot. And suddenly they shoot down a UFO. It has a suit of armor in it that is supposed to help protect the world against an incoming alien invasion. There's been someone who's been trained since birth to be the strong protector, the one who's supposed to wear the armor. And these four idiots end up putting a piece of the armor on each: a helmet, two gloves, and a pair of boots. So one person has a pair of boots, one person has one arm, the other one has the other arm, and one of them has the helmet on. These things then code onto their DNA by attaching themselves to the person. And for the case of the dude with the helmet, it screws into the top of his head. It's a great moment, very painful looking, but there's not any gore with it. The army finds out that these people now have their great suit that's supposed to protect them on. So they force them to train because now they have 4 days before the threat arrives on Earth, and they have to fight it. They begin training. They don't work well together. They're not friends, and they don't know how to do it. And the person who was trained to wear this suit of armor is unhappy because he was supposed to be the protector of Earth, the champion of Earth, and now these four yahoos over here, over here, these four yahoos have taken that away from him. Eventually, they learn that the army plans to simply cut the four pieces off of them, thereby cutting off one arm of two of the guys, the legs of one guy, and murdering the fourth guy because it's on his head to get the pieces off of them to put them on the actual champion. With this, they finally start working together and they flee. The best part of this movie really is that you find out that the aliens who sent them this armor and told them about the incoming threat are actually playing March Madness brackets. Yeah, they basically have various planets, a champion from each planet competing in a single elimination tournament. Yep, it's just so much fun. It's a great scene. It's a great moment. This is a very well done movie. I really like it. There's a sequel, Laser Team 2. I have it sitting on the shelf now. I got it in yesterday. I haven't gotten around to watching it yet, so that won't be part of this video. But there is a sequel. I'm excited for it. I have seen their other film, Bloodfest. It's pretty good. It's a decent horror film. So yeah, so that's Laser Team. Next up, I watched Less Than Zero. This is the first novel. This is the first movie based on the first novel by Bret Easton Ellis. He is the man who wrote Rules of Attraction, which I reviewed a few weeks ago in my January Unwatched Self videos, and he wrote American Psycho. This is his first novel, Less Than Zero, and the first one of his books to be adapted into a film. These movies are all connected too, whereas American Psycho has Patrick Bateman, and Rules of Attraction has Patrick's brother as one of the main characters. Rules of Attraction takes place at the college that one of the characters from Less Than Zero attends. Beyond that, Less Than Zero, not a great film. Robert Downey Jr. is pretty good in it. It also stars Andrew McCarthy, Jamie Gertz. I love this actor, and his name just left me. He is James Spader. James Spader is in it. He's not in it a lot, and he is the villain of this piece, and he is good. He is definitely good, but it's James Spader. I've never seen anything that James Spader wasn't good in, regardless of if it's a good movie or not. Um, Anyways, it's about these three friends who graduate high school, which seems really ridiculous because the timeline of this movie is super wonky, as far as how old these actors look versus how long it's been. So basically, Andrew McCarthy is our main character. He goes off to college, leaving his girlfriend, Jamie Gertz, who broke up with him when he went to college, to pursue her modeling career, and Robert Downey Jr., his best friend, to open up his own record label. Apparently, the record label goes bust. Robert Downey Jr. and Jamie Gertz begin having sex, and Andrew McCarthy walked in on them during his Thanksgiving break. It is now Christmas break, so it is a couple of weeks later, and every piece of information about the record label going down and any other and Robert Downey Jr.'s erratic behavior because of drugs, all of that. Yeah, he plays a guy who has erratic behavior because of drugs. Yeah, life imitated art. A couple of years after this movie for Robert Downey Jr. Um, it seems like everything's being told to him that he didn't know any of it, even though I feel like the reason they stopped talking was because of the Thanksgiving incident where he walked in on the two of them in bed, and it's a couple of weeks later. So has all of this happened in this couple of weeks, or why weren't they communicating before Thanksgiving? When he didn't know that they were sleeping together. This is one of my questions about this movie and its weird timeline. And James Spader plays a friend of all the characters who's also their drug dealer. Um, yeah, it's not a great movie. It's definitely they're all Hollywood yuppies basically in this film, and none of them are depicted as like great people. Like you don't like any of these characters. You're not sad when something bad happens to one of them. It just happens. Um, and the story keeps going on like you're supposed to care. Apparently, Brad Pitt is also in this movie. He is a cameo, not even a cameo. He is an extra in one of the early scenes. So that's cool. This was his first movie. He tried to say a line on camera to get a SAG card, and the director told him if he did it again, he'd be fired. Now that director is probably wishing he could work with Brad Pitt. But yeah, Less Than Zero. It's not a great movie. I don't have a lot to say about this one. Like I like American Psycho. I really enjoyed Rules of Attraction. This one, I don't know. I don't think they translated the writer his work well enough to make this work. And not that I'm familiar with the book. I'm not familiar with any of the books, but just because, I've seen, when you see a writer's stuff translated into film correctly twice, and they're very similar in tone and very similar in the way you build that story, you just imagine that most of them need to be built. I think a good Stephen King movie almost has to be built the same way, even though it's telling a different story. There's a pacing you need to follow to hold true to the story. Every once in a while, because Stephen King has such a huge, plethora of books and stories, you can get away from that. But I think, like, if it's based on one of his short stories, this is kind of the mold. If it's based on one of his long forms, this is kind of the mold. Um, and I think Brett Easton Ellis, it's either Easton Ellis or Ellis Easton. I think he's the same way. Yeah, that is Less Than Zero. After that, I watched a movie I was really excited for, and I really wanted to like this movie. I didn't like this movie. It's The Out of Towners, starring Jack Lemmon and Sandy Dennis. It is a script written by Neil Simon, who I love Neil Simon. Neil Simon is a great comedic writer. He's one of my favorite playwrights. I enjoy some Neil Simon. Actually, this week, if you go to my just weekly videos, I talked about The Odd Couple and The Odd Couple 2, which are both Neil Simon penned films, starring Jack Lemmon, oddly enough. I like Neil Simon. I do not like this movie. Jack Lemmon is, the way I've described it in my head, is it's like Jack Lemmon is, a star football player who's playing with a pee-wee league. He has all of his tools, and he's trying to put his tools on display, but nobody knows how to work with his tools because Jack Lemmon is doing his general shtick of being the annoyed guy. Generally, it works because he has someone else who's annoying him, like in Grumpy Old Men, The Odd Couple. out to sea. He has Walter Matthau, who's playing a grumpier character than he is, which makes his annoyed character almost seem charming. And this, everyone's pleasant to him. He's just an asshole. So, like, I don't connect to him. His wife, played by Sandy Denise, is just kind of annoying. Her catchphrase through this movie is "Oh my god!" Like, I've heard it parodied. Once I heard it, I went, "Oh, that's where that comes from," because I've heard it before, like in the Angry Birds movie. That's what it sounds like. So that's what they were parodying, was this woman and the way she said it. Basically, they play a married couple. They go to New York because Jack Lemmon has a job interview for a promotion at his company, which would cause them to move to New York. Um, they are unable to land on the plane originally because of delays, and then fog moves in, so they end up being rerouted to Boston, where their luggage is lost. And Billy D. Williams, future Star Wars Billy D. Williams, is very polite with helping them. He's very polite in helping them because their baggage is lost. Very polite. And Jack Lemmon is a total asshole. Anyways, they offer to put them up in a hotel in Boston and let them take the first flight out in the morning to New York so he can still make his job interview. Um, Jack Lemmon refuses, and they're going to take a train. So they hop in a taxi cab, and apparently there's a discussion about mailing change. That's a thing that would have happened apparently in the 50s or 60s. That's fine, whatever, that is what it is. And they get on the wrong train, then they get on the right train, and the train is overbooked because no one can land in New York, so the train is a very popular thing to get to New York. When they get to New York, they find out that there is a sanitation and transit strike. So there's garbage everywhere. There are no buses. There are no taxi cabs. There's nothing. They have to walk to the hotel. So they walk to the hotel in the pouring rain, and they get there. And the hotel clerk is very pleasant to Jack Lemmon, and he's a giant asshole. I'm going to reiterate that a lot in this segment, that he's a giant asshole. He's very pleasant, basically telling him that the reservation they had was held until 10 p.m. per Jack Lemmon's instructions. That was his instructions when he made the reservation, was that to hold it until 10 p.m. Because of the rain and the lack of transit, they gave the room out to somebody else who happened to be there. And they repeatedly tell him all he had to do was call or send a message or telegram or whatever to let them know to hold the room, or just say in the initial reservation just to hold the room until he arrives. He's unhappy. He's fuming. He's an asshole. And they offer to put him up in the manager's office until a room opens up at 7, which they can then give him. He won't have this either. Again, people are being very hospitable to this man, and he's being a jackass. He's a jackass. They meet a guy in a trench coat who offers them a room in a hotel that's around the block. It turns out there is no hotel. He holds them up and takes their wallet, jewelry, all that crap. So now they're in New York and they have no money. And Jack Lemmon's been an asshole to everyone. So people who are decent aren't being decent. They go to the police station. Where finally the cop is kind of a dick to Jack Lemmon, but at this point it doesn't matter. He's been an ass to so many not dick people that watching him actually do his shtick, it's just not as entertaining. They're told that there are cots at a local armory, and they'll be taken there by the police. The police get a call because of a robbery at a liquor store, and they try to get this couple out of their police car so they can go apprehend the criminals. They refuse, flat out refuse, because again, Jack Lemmon's an asshole, to get out of the car, and that they were told they were being taken to the armory. So instead, they're taken to the robbery because the cops have to go answer this robbery. They're the closest car. They have to go do it. Eventually, the car is carjacked by one of the robbers, and Jack Lemmon and Sandy Dennis are still in the back seat. And the robbers screw with them, and Jack Lemmon's a douche, and they get dropped off in Central Park, where they get held up by a guy again for Jack Lemmon's watch while he's sleeping, and his wife, "Oh my God," and gives up the watch. The next morning, they wake up, and Sandy Dennis has Cracker Jacks, and her dog comes up and takes the Cracker Jacks and runs away. And they're eating the Cracker Jacks, and Jack Lemmon's, shuck, I can't. I'm never going to get this job. I'm not going to get to the interview in time. I don't have my clothes. I don't know where I am. I don't know what time it is because I don't have my watch. Now he's being a douche to his wife. His wife is fed up, stands up for herself, and they start walking. Eventually, they arrive at a church where they're not allowed to pray because an Easter service, there's a camera crew setting up for an Easter service that's going to get filmed, and you can't pray until 2. And Jack Lemmon's a douche because how dare they not let him pray in the house of God? How dare they tell him to leave because they're doing work and that the building is closed? How dare they? And he keeps writing names down on a piece of paper that gets ruined throughout this movie because he's going to sue them. He's going to sue everybody. He's suing New York. He then almost gets taken out by a sewer, like a manhole cover that gets shot up. And I have no idea. It's just done, and we moving the hell on. Finally, someone is nice to them and picks them up. It is a Cuban diplomat who there is a protest at his embassy where he's going to be dropped off, and they're going to be taken back to the hotel they started at because apparently that's what happens. The rioters get in the way. The cops pick them back up, and he's still an asshole to these cops. These cops who tried to get them out of the car, who is now helping them, he's still an asshole to them. He gets taken back to the hotel where they go, oh, yes, we have your luggage, and we have a room for you. He's still an asshole. He's still saying he's going to sue everybody. End of the movie, he talks to his wife and decides, you know what? I'm not taking this job in New York. We're not New York people because you're an asshole. And they board a plane to go home. And they're hijacked and being flown to another. I don't care anymore. This movie is bad. I was really looking forward to Neil Simon and Jack Lemmon. This movie is bad. Again, I didn't find anything super funny. Both of the two main characters annoyed the hell out of me because, again, Sandy Dennis just had one of those voices that grated on me. And Jack Lemmon was just an asshole throughout the entire thing. He was an asshole. Stop being an asshole to pleasant people just because you're frustrated. I get it. That's what we do. That's what we do in those situations. It's not that funny to see. I know they remade it with Steve Martin and Goldie Hawn. I've caught bits and pieces of it. I know the plot's a little different as well. But yeah, I don't recommend The Out-of-Towners. It is not a great movie. This is the worst movie I've watched this week. All right, moving on to one of the better movies I've watched this week, and that is The Lady Killers. This is the original, starring Alec Guinness and Peter Sellers from 1955, I believe. This was actually really good. Now, I've done a review of the Coen Brothers version with Tom Hanks in my review of Coen Brothers movies, somewhere back in my back catalog. That movie's all right. It's not great. I've watched it a couple of times. It's not horrible. This one I really liked. This one is really funny. When I think Alec Guinness, I always think Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars because that's obviously where I know him the best. He is in Murder by Death, which is a comedy, and I love that movie as well. But I don't really make him a comedy actor. He is hilarious in this. Peter Sellers is still very fresh. This is his first big movie Peter Sellers has ever done. And it's just really funny. The general synopsis is the same. It's very similar to the remake. You have 5 men who are taking a room at an older woman's house. It actually is an old grandma. And because they're planning to do a robbery. This one is an actual armored car robbery. And they're planning to hide the money in a trunk and then send the old lady to the train station to pick up the trunk, thinking she's picking it up for her boarder. Not knowing what's truly in the trunk, and then they're going to go away. Everything goes off without a hitch. They get the money, they get it in the trunk. The problem is, one of the items they stuff the money into to leave is one of their music cases because they are posing as a quintet. They are posing as a quintet of a musical group, and one of their cases explodes with money, and the old woman sees it, realizing who these men are and what they have done, tells them they have to return the money and go to the cops. They try talking her out of it because this is the 50s in England, and people are far more polite, apparently, in the 50s in England, which is fine. It makes for an entertaining movie as they try to talk their way out of having to return the money or turn themselves in. They even bring up the idea that because she picked up the money, she is an accomplice to all of this and will be held just as accountable as the 5 of them. After a while, she decides, nope, we're going to the cops. Right away, they then tell her, well, it's raining, let's wait until it stops raining, and she accepts because she's an old woman and it's late. She doesn't want to go walk in the rain. The 5 criminals then decide, well, they need to kill her, and they need to kill her now and get the money and get the hell out. So they draw straws. The loser does not kill her, actually tells her that he's going to escape through the window and go get the cops himself. But he's carrying a musical case with all the money inside of it. So he's going to run away with the money. The other four figure out what he's doing, and he falls off the roof with a piece of the chimney, and he is dead. They then dispose of the body, much like in the remake, they dispose of the bodies onto a trash barge. And this one, the old lady, in her backyard is actually an overpass for coal trains. So they're dumping the bodies into coal cars on the bottom of the coal car. So coal gets tossed on top of them, and the body's basically hidden. So the first member of the team is dead, and that happens for each guy until there are only two left, who begin to have a fight on their own until both of them end up in coal cars, much like the original, leaving all the money to Katie Johnson, who is playing the old woman. And the cops don't believe her that she has the money and tell her to keep it. It's a really funny movie. I really like it. It's very well done. If you ever get a chance to watch the original version of The Lady Killers, definitely do it. This movie is definitely worth checking out. It is. It was very entertaining. And after watching The Out of Towners and Less Than Zero in the same day, literally, I watched Less Than Zero and went, that was nothing great. It was not as good as I was hoping it would be. And then I watched The Out of Towners, where I hated that movie, and I got through it. But that's saying the best I can, is I got through it. And then watching The Lady Killers and actually really enjoying a movie, it was good. It was very nice. All right, next up, I have a very surprising movie that it is Wrong Turn. This is the 2021 remake of the early 2000s film that spawned five sequels. I think there are 6 total. This one technically makes 7, but it has nothing to do with cannibal hillbillies. A group of teenagers go hiking in the Appalachian Mountains. They stumble across a group called the Foundation. One of their group is killed by a rolling log. This is the worst part of this movie. It really is. Like, if you're a horror fan, the gore of this scene is great. The logic of this scene is terrible. Basically, a giant, like a tree falls and starts rolling, but it has no limbs. It's very smooth. So they might have tripped a trap or something. It starts rolling, whatever. They start running away from it, but they each fall over their own feet, or they hit a tree, or they kick a rock. They start tumbling down after it. And this thing is tumbling after them. Now, remind you, I said they hit trees. It's still tumbling after them. Like, it didn't stop. It just kept going. It didn't change. It was so straight on, rolling at them. And it crushes one of them. That gore effect is pretty good. The other 4 go out. One of them gets caught in a snare and dragged into a cave. They eventually find him being hauled away by 2 members of this group called the Foundation. He frees himself and kills one of them. The other members then try to go home. They decide they're just going to leave it and not tell anyone what they've done. This is a bad idea. That whole situation's a bad idea. They're eventually captured by the Foundation. One of the other members falls into a pit trap, the pit with the spikes. Pretty fun scene, actually. And that's how they're taken out. The remaining 4, because there are 6 members of this group, are taken to the Foundation's main settlement in the mountains, where they are put on trial for the murder of the member of the group, because they had found him in a trap. The guy who got dragged from the snare, he was passed out, and they were taking him to the edge of the mountain so he could return to civilization without ever knowing that the Foundation were there. And he murdered one of them straight out. So he is murdered. He is put to death. The other ones are put to darkness and silence, which is basically where they stick a hot poker in your eye and then throw you into a cave. All right. One of them immediately gets his eyes poked out and thrown into the cave. The other 2 talk their way out of it, saying that they want to join the society and they will be useful because of their skills, or the fact that they are women who is childbearing, who can bear a child. They are accepted and brought in to the fold. The main character, the main female's father, is out looking for her now because it's been weeks, and he eventually finds himself in the Foundation as well. And then it becomes the escape movie. I actually really liked this. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it, because there were points in it I'm like, okay, this seems pretty cut and dry. This is pretty much what I expect. And then it had things like the wrong turn wasn't that these people made a wrong turn, like, oh, they went the wrong way. They purposely went the way they did to find something. Not necessarily the Foundation. They were trying to find a Civil War base that was still standing in the woods, but that's why they went that way. The wrong turn was when they were discussing, do we, go and tell someone about this body, that this person that we've murdered, believing that they were going to harm us, or do we just forget about it and walk away? It's a moral wrong turn. And then, they pay for their moral wrong turns, because also they're told, we will let you go if you just tell us the truth and let us punish the guilty party. So basically, you point to the guy who actually killed him, the rest of you will go free, he's staying and taking his punishment. And again, they choose to take the morally wrong turn, which is to lie, thereby damning them all. So it's a pretty interesting movie. I liked it. I thought it was better than most of the Wrong Turn movies. Some of them aren't terrible. Most of them aren't worth rewatching. This one, mirroring. This one I actually think has a little rewatch value behind it. That's definitely worth checking out. All right, next up we have Executive Decision, starring Kurt Russell, John Leguizamo, Halle Berry, B.D. Wong, and Steven Seagal. This is actually the. I'm gonna stop trying to point to things. This is actually the foreign poster. This is not an American poster. The U.S. poster just had Kurt Russell. For foreign markets, Steven Seagal was still bankable, so they put him on there as well. Seagal is in this movie for about a half an hour, and then he dies. So if you want to watch a movie where Steven Seagal dies, you either watch Executive Decision or you watch Machete. Depends on how much Steven Seagal you want before he dies. Basically, a terrorist is captured and is being put on trial, and a plane carrying a senator and a bunch of other U.S. citizens is hijacked as it leaves Rome, I believe. The terrorists want their leader released, and that's really what they want. A analyst for the FBI, played by Kurt Russell, believes that that is not true. That a large supply of a very dangerous nerve gas has gone missing, and he believes that it is on that plane, and their intention is to fly it into American airspace and then blow up the plane, spreading the nerve gas miles and miles and miles. With that, they decide to send a group of soldiers, led by Steven Seagal, onto the plane through a weird hatch plane that connects to the other plane, and they can crawl through the hatch. It works for the movie. Cutting to the chase, I liked this movie. This wasn't a bad movie. It sounds like a bad movie. It's pretty entertaining. I like Kurt Russell, so basically, Steven Seagal dies in the inevitable screw-up that is a plane connecting to another plane and trying to move people between the two. That's where Steven Seagal dies, is the inevitable screw-up that was going to happen. Leaving Kurt Russell, Oliver Platt, John Leguizamo, B.D. Wong, one other soldier, and another actor I know the name of, but I cannot think of it off the top of my head. For those of you who know, Joe Morton. Joe Morton is the other guy who makes it onto the plane. Halle Berry plays a flight attendant who eventually assists them. So the movie is really, it's Die Hard-esque, but it's not just John McClane. You have other people. Kurt Russell isn't the great hero. He is just a guy in a bad situation. He got brought along and ends up in a bad situation and has to work with these soldiers. So it's a little better than like Air Force One, although Air Force One's a great movie to watch. It's not a great movie, but it's a fun movie to watch. Where it really is Die Hard on a plane, because it's just Harrison Ford versus everyone else. This one, there's actually plotting, there's scheming. They're not taking out the terrorists as they go. They're actually waiting until they have the advantage, and they can take them all out at once and take the plane. As they're trying to figure out where the bomb is, how to disarm the bomb, because their person who can disarm the bomb ends up breaking some of his, or hemorrhaging some of his spinal column. So he has to stay motionless, which is where Oliver Platt comes in, because he is actually not a soldier at all. He is a techie who invented the plane that was making the connection and ended up in the other plane because Steven Seagal, kind of a douchebag. Not as big as Jack Lemmon, because, again, he's not in that much of this movie. But it's a pretty fun movie. I enjoyed it. Executive Decision, it's worth checking out if you want to see a fun action film. It really is. All right, we're heading towards the bottom of my list, and that brings us to The Shadow. This is the Alec Baldwin superhero movie based on the the comic book, the novellas, and the radio play where Orson Welles was the voice of the Shadow, and the Shadow knows. Basically, the Shadow is a superhero in New York before World War II, post World War One, pre World War II. He was an evil opium lord before he became the Shadow, but he was taught the way to cloud men's minds and is now the Shadow who upholds justice. He is fighting the last descendant of Genghis Khan, which is not accurate at all. There are plenty of descendants of Genghis Khan, but for the context of this movie, it is the last descendant of Genghis Khan who has the same ability and is using it for evil to create basically the first nuclear bomb and to hold the world ransom with the bomb. This movie also features Ian McKellen and Tim Curry in its cast, which is really cool because Ian McKellen, man, that man has done some whack movies and weird movies. This is definitely one of them because they play the two scientists who are basically creating the first, bomb or nuke. And it's a basic, it's a paint by numbers superhero movie when paint by numbers wasn't as a thing because there was a much smaller superhero pool to be in. It's a pretty enjoyable movie. Alec Baldwin is pretty good in it. It's generally entertaining. I liked it. It kept my interest. I think everyone did a great job with it. Going a deep dive into this movie, it's basically it's going to sound like most superhero movies. At some point the hero is the underdog, and then he turns it all around at the end when he makes the big discovery. Yeah, it's a decent superhero movie. And again, this is the early 90s in superhero movies. You got Superman, you got Batman, and then you've got, stuff like The Shadow and The Phantom, and I'm not even sure what else there really is at this point. I think we're still pre-Spawn. I think we're pre that. I think, there isn't a lot here. And it definitely has a 90s feel. If you want to go back and watch a movie that really feels nostalgic and really feels like this is definitely what a 90s movie looks like, The Shadow knows that's what it is. But I enjoyed it. I like The Shadow. Next up, we have Troll. Um, I actually really enjoyed this one. For what this movie is, it's a PG-13 horror movie. Basically, a family named the father's name is Harry Potter, and his son is Harry Potter Jr., and this came out years before the books. So here's our first instance of Harry Potter, and it involves magic. That's ridiculous. Anyways, Harry Potter moves. Harry Potter moves his family into an apartment building. His daughter ventures into the laundry room where she's abducted by a troll who takes her form. Literally, this is how the movie opens. There isn't a lot of build-up to the troll capturing and taking over and taking the little girl's form. There isn't. There isn't a lot of movie here before that happens. The troll then begins to imitate the girl's voice and act out her life, while also trying to, you know, deal with what humanity is now, because he existed many, many centuries ago when the world of the fairies and the elves and humans lived together in happy harmony bullshit. You meet the rest of the tenants of the apartment when the daughter is running around screaming rat burgers, which is the term Harry Potter uses for hamburgers. Yeah, I'm never going to say the dad. It's always just going to be Harry Potter for the rest of this review. Um, Harry Potter then meets his other neighbors, including an army vet, Julia Louise Dreyfus, pre-Seinfeld, her boyfriend, Sonny Bono. There you go, it's Sonny Bono, and the mother from Lost in Space, June Lockhart. Um, he meets all of his neighbors, and they disperse. The little girl then, the next day, goes to visit Sonny Bono and touches him with the magic troll ring, which turns him into a giant pod that covers his apartment in vines and other woodery, and then from his pod releases like wood elves and other fairy creatures. And Sonny Bono is dead, I guess. We'll get to that. The son, Harry Potter Jr., Harry Potter Jr. believes there's something wrong and befriends June Lockhart, learning that she is actually also from the world of fairies and all of that, and is there for in this apartment for a very specific reason, and that she is centuries old. Our girl troll then visits the army vet and transforms his apartment into a happy wooded area, and he dies and transforms into other fairy creatures. She then goes and visits Julia Louise Dreyfus, who she turns into a elf or a wood nymph. I'm not 100% sure. She's covered in leaves. Um, Her boyfriend shows up and she runs him off into the forest. I don't know. You see her later on as the nymph or fairy or whatever the crap she is. You don't see him again. And this is where you find out that only that what the troll is doing there is he has to create his own world. And the only way to do that is to take over each apartment and transform it into a fairy area, which is what he's doing, and the people inside of it. And then it'll create a fourth dimension, which will reunite the world and allow him to take over. But it can be stopped if you find the connection point, which is going to be a big scary monster, and stab it in the heart. The troll goes to the next apartment, which is housing a little person, the same actor who's playing the troll, is just a double role. He's actually a really good actor. He's in crap movies like Bordello of Blood, but he's pretty good in them. He's also in Land of the Dead. Um, the girl finds out that this other little person is dying of cancer, and that he really did wish, when he first found out about his dwarfism, that he would find out that he had something magical in him and wake up in a fairy land. And so she turns him into a fairy creature as well, making his dream come true. It's actually kind of a really touching and sweet scene, and it doesn't go anywhere beyond that, but it's kind of a really touching and sweet scene. Um, from there, June Lockhart goes to try to stop the troll, but she fails and is turned into a stump, leaving only Harry Potter's apartment left. The only thing standing between the troll's dominance of the world and his victory is Harry Potter's apartment. I'm taking a lot of amusement out of this. Harry Potter's apartment's the only one he's got left. So Harry Potter Jr. takes the pokey stick of destiny. It's this long golden trident type thing. Takes the pokey stick of destiny and goes to find his sister and kill the thing that will stop all of this. He finds his sister, frees her, loses the pokey stick of destiny to the troll. As the giant gatekeeper dimension holder thing comes near, and the other fairy creatures are trying to get into Harry Potter's apartment, but Harry Potter is holding the fort! Eventually, the big evil thing tries to kill the girl, but because the troll likes the girl, liked being the girl, and wanted to keep one human that looks like this girl, and blonde hair, fair of skin, yada yada, fairy tale crap, alive as a prize, he decides to throw the pointy stick of destiny into the monster's heart. He destroys his own plan after he's being said he's an egotistical, after having all the June Lockhart puts him down, stabs him himself. And the kids run away, get into Harry Potter Jr. takes his sister, and they run back to Harry Potter, and everything goes back to normal, and you see them coming out of the house, getting in the car, and going to file a police report and probably move. But you never showed what happened to any other person in that apartment building. Like, are they all dead? Were they turned back to normal? You don't see any of them other than June Lockhart, who at this point you see her in her younger version, which is played by June Lockhart's daughter, which is actually kind of cool. And that's how the movie ends. You're never given that closure, except, a cop wanders into the laundry room and gets pulled into the troll's world, because apparently the laundry room was unaffected by the death of the thing. I don't know. It's a pretty entertaining movie. I liked it. There are sequels, but none of them have anything to do with this movie. They're all just in name only. So they're not worth watching, probably, unless you want, entertainment of watching bad stuff, like intentionally bad stuff. But I kind of like Troll. It was a pretty entertaining movie. I'll definitely check it out again. Um, if you've never seen Troll, give it a try. It is way more entertaining than I expected it to be. All right, that brings us to the last two movies I'm talking about in my live stream today. What? Next up, we have Absolute Power, starring Clint Eastwood, Gene Hackman, Ed Harris, and a plethora of other actors. Again, I'm up until January, I had not seen a single Clint Eastwood movie outside of maybe Gran Torino, and I think I only saw bits and pieces of that. I don't think I've ever sat down and watched all of Gran Torino. So I watched all the Dirty Harry films. I watched the Man with No Name trilogy. I watched Space Cowboys. Now I have Absolute Power, and I also have In the Line of Fire, which I haven't gotten to yet. So Absolute Power is about a thief who witnesses the president uh, having an affair with a woman that turns violent, and then the Secret Service shooting the woman because the president is screaming for help. They cover it up, except they don't realize that there's a thief who watched all of this. And it becomes about the Secret Service and those people trying to cover up what happened and blame the robber for it, and the robber trying to prove his innocence, that he didn't kill anyone, and that the president is actually to blame. It's a pretty entertaining movie. It's an interesting movie. I can't say it's one that has rewatch value for me, but it's not bad. It's not like it is actually a pretty entertaining movie for what it is. But once they really get into it, once you get past like the first 40 minutes of it, it kind of slows down and gets a little stale for the remainder of it until you get to the ending. Like they started to wrap up the movie and there was only 10 minutes left. I'm like, holy crap, it's only 10 minutes left. It moves nicely. So even though it isn't as entertaining as it could be with this kind of a plot, it still moves very nicely. Everyone does a good job in this movie. It's definitely one worth checking out, especially if you like political thrillers. Absolute Power, definitely one I'd recommend. I'm not sure I'd recommend rewatch, but definitely one watch. All right, that brings us to the last movie I watched for the first time over the last week, and that is Deliverance, starring Jon Voight, Burt Reynolds. You also have Ned Beatty and Ronnie Cox are the other people who headline this film. This is one of those movies that's totally remembered nowadays for the dueling banjos and Squeal Like a Piggy and Ned Beatty getting raped. Um, this movie is way more entertaining than that. Like, I was going into it expecting kind of an exploitation, kind of horror films, because that's what's remembered from it. That's what lives in popular culture. But I sat down and I got a very different movie, and I liked this movie. This was a very good movie. Basically, we have four friends. They go on a canoeing trip down a river before it is dammed. So while it's still a river before it turns into a giant freaking lake, they're going on a canoeing trip. They take two canoes, two people in each canoe. One of the canoes goes to land to do the things you have to do when on a canoe, because you can't do it all off of the side of the canoe, especially since there's a balance issue at some point with some of that stuff. They meet two local hill folk who take them by gunpoint, rape Ned Beatty, and they're about to sexually abuse Jon Voight when Burt Reynolds shows up with his bow and arrow and shoots one of them center mass through the chest. The other one runs off, and the one shot dies. It then, much like Wrong Turn, turns into a discussion of what do we do? Do we go tell the police? Do we hide the body? Because they're in the country, South Country, Burt Reynolds is afraid that they're going to find people who are related, that everyone's related, and therefore you can't get a fair trial. Even though it's clear it was self-defense. It was very clear this is self-defense. These people were being abusive. They were sexually abusing. That's what it is. But again, we're talking 1972 versus 2021. So, there's a culture gap there as well. So basically, they decide to hide the body, even though Ronnie Cox is very much against this idea. The other three are mainly because the two who were abused or almost abused just don't want to remember what's happened. And Burt Reynolds is afraid because he's the one that shot, he'd be the one held responsible. Because obviously he would. So they bury the body, they get back on their canoes, and they head back to the destination where their cars are because they had people drive them downriver. Eventually, Ronnie Cox just kind of falls into the water. They say he got shot, but you don't hear a gunshot, and it just kind of looks like he chooses to do it. But this causes his canoe to kind of veer out of way, and it's a wood canoe, hits some rocks. It breaks, sending Jon Voight into the water. Burt Reynolds and Ned Beatty try to help, but they also end up in the water. Burt Reynolds breaks his leg while going down some rapids, and they find themselves in a gully where Reynolds is saying he was shot, he was shot, he was shot. That's why all this has happened. That's why he fell in the water, is because Ronnie Cox was shot. They believe that if there was a shooter, he is at the top of this gulch that they are in. So John Voight takes his bow and arrow, and climbs up the side of a mountain, or climbs up the gulch to the top where there is someone there with a gun. So he shoots him. He looks at him and he can't identify him if he is the hill folk who ran away from their abuse scene, or if this is someone completely different. And Ned Beatty can't identify him either. So they weigh him down with rocks and throw him into the water. They load Burt Reynolds into the canoe, and they get into it, and they start canoeing down river again. They hit some rapids, which means it's just Burt Reynolds acting like he is in serious pain, because broken leg on rapids, not a good mix. Eventually, they find Ronnie Cox's body, but they can not identify anything that is definitely a gunshot wound. It looks like he might have had a graze across his head, but it could have been a rock as well. So they tie rocks to him and weigh him down as well. They head downstream past the last of the rapids, and that is where John Voight convinces Ned Beatty and Burt Reynolds to say this is where all of their problems happened. This is where Ronnie Cox drowned, where Burt Reynolds broke his leg. They had trouble on these rapids, so they don't look upriver and find any of the dead bodies. They arrive back in civilization. Burt Reynolds is taken to the hospital, as is John Voight, leaving Ned Beatty to tell the story. And that's where you would think the movie would end. They're at safety, they're home. But because of everything that's happened, the movie continues on past that. And that I really liked. Like, I started to lose interest in this film, and then it caught me again, because now it wasn't about guys fighting the wilderness on a canoe again. Now it was about guys who may have done something wrong. They may have done something out of self-defense. They don't truly know, and them trying to cover it. Because they find a piece of the wood canoe that broke, and they're not willing to ID it, and they're dredging the part of the river where they said it all happened and where Ronnie Cox's body should be, but they're not finding it. It's kind of a really interesting movie. I liked Deliverance way more than I expected to. It is definitely one, if you've never seen it, there's a reason it's a classic. It is worth checking out. I'm glad I ended it with this movie, because I really was drawn into it. I lost it a little bit, and then I got drawn back in, and that's how a good movie should work. If it's not going to hold your attention from start to finish, it better hold your attention, lose you for maybe 10, 15 minutes, and then grab you again for the rest of that runtime. So Deliverance is a good movie. Definitely recommend. All right, well, that's everything I've watched this week that I've never seen before. Maybe I'll be back again sometime in the near future. Well, I definitely will be. Don't forget to check out my regular Wednesday videos, The Odd Couple and The Odd Couple 2, just posted yesterday. And this upcoming week, I am talking about... My brain just farted on me on what my release schedule is. I believe it's Southland Tales. I'm not 100% sure on that. There might be something else before Southland Tales. I am looking that up right now. It is Southland Tales, yep. So, no, I'm sorry. It's the Broken Lizard franchise. I'm going to look at the movies by Broken Lizard, Super Troopers, Super Troopers 2, Club Dread, Beer Fest, Puddle Cruisers, and Slammin' Salmon. So that's what posted this Wednesday. The Wednesday after that is Southland Tales. Definitely watch that one. That's a fun video. So definitely make sure you like this video. Comment if you got something to say. Hit the subscribe button if you want to make sure you see other content. I am Martin Prevost. This is Rank the Movies. And I will talk to you later, and I will see you next time.